Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News, and after another disappointing Grand Prix weekend for Charles Leclerc, it's now 5 Grand Prix on the bounce where he has not been on the podium. After a difficult weekend for Red Bull, this was the opportunity for Ferrari and Charles Leclerc especially to put the pain to Max Verstappen and the Red Bull team, but that's not what happened at all. Very little ground lost by Red Bull on the weekends, and Leclerc is certainly going to rue some team decisions for why that was the case. Definitely had his thoughts be known, very frustrated with the team decisions, but well, Matteo Binotto has explained Ferrari's perspective on why actually they made the right call. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. Really upset the channel, thank you very much indeed for doing that one. Let's just crack straight on with things here. Of course, this image came out after the fact, which seemed to be Matteo kind of saying, look, Leclerc, calm down, like don't say to the team, like the team did a good job to, driving a Ferrari, you got to respect it a bit, but of course it's really tough to say exactly what he was kind of saying here. I think people were asking him, and Charles Leclerc said he was just trying to cheer me up, like look, it was a tough race, because Leclerc could easily have been the victor today without, again, unfortunate circumstances and arguably very well disjointed team strategical decisions. Well, about lap 31 of the race, when Hamilton was in the lead, Sainz was asked, okay, I think it was a 1:33.2 or something, if you can put in that lap, then we'll let you stay ahead. If you can't, then we're going to let Leclerc go in front. So Leclerc moves up to P2, even with the kind of front wing damage he had, and started putting in big laps on the new hard tyres, right? He was pumping out a pretty significant lead, and his lead over Sainz, by the time the safety car came out a few laps later, was up to about 4.6 seconds. As you can see here, this is when Sainz comes into the pits, Hamilton comes into the pits as well. A very obvious pit stop for, well, both Ferrari, I thought, and the Mercedes garage to say, okay, 10 laps left, get him on the softs, it's a safety car, we're going to have a restart and fight it out for the victory. Of course, in the end, it pretty much went as expected. Perez managed to get into the fight as well, got a P2, Sainz P1, Hamilton P3, and well, it was actually Leclerc defending for his life against Alonso to try and hold on to his P4, where he eventually finished as well. But arguably, just a few seconds ahead of Sainz, you could have brought in, if you were Ferrari, Leclerc into the pits as well, pitted him, then done the double sack with Sainz, and even if they lost maybe a position or so just because of the delays that might cause, but even then the drivers did have quite an advantage between them, quite a difference between them. They could have probably done it theoretically, although Matteo Binotto says actually that might not have been the case. There would have been a chance then, even if they had dropped back for, of course, a Ferrari on the soft tyres to overtake and get past and do whatever, but of course, well, leaving Leclerc out and taking track position pretty much made him a sitting duck for the remainder of this race. And that's the difficult thing for Charles Leclerc to take. He wanted going into this weekend a clean weekend. He felt like he had the victory underneath him. Of course, a difficult weekend for Red Bull. Verstappen had some damage, Perez with the front wing damage as well. Verstappen's car was pretty much broken. Leclerc had the pace and the car to win, and still Leclerc only took 6 points out of Verstappen's lead. Just Ferrari thinks it as Tom points out right here, because 4th place over 7th place, not that much of a big deal at the end of the day. So again, a chance given to Ferrari to really make this championship interesting and not necessarily taken as much as they could have done. And he was incredibly frustrated at the end of the race, understandably so, the amount of race time we lost in this race, because even early on, right, they were kind of battling. Hamilton was closing in. He was going a few tenths of a second, a lap quicker than the Ferraris on their kind of long stint that he did, because eventually it was Sainz and Leclerc battling it out, and Leclerc was kind of told to stay behind, and Sainz was in front, and they were said, okay, free to battle, and Leclerc was like, well, look, if you don't let me pass, I'm going to kind of burn out my tyres. It was a bit of a predicament really for them, and because they battle a little bit, Hamilton closes up, therefore they arguably lose race time if Leclerc had just got past, because Leclerc was clearly the faster driver of the two Ferraris on the day, and even as he says, you can see the frustration seeping through even to the team. Oh my god, the only good thing today is that Carlos won. Bloody hell, guys, we've done it again. Enjoy the victory, he says. Almost enjoy the victory, not even including himself in that, right? Kind of saying, okay, well done, guys, you got a win with Sainz, but again, today put me in a very difficult predicament, right? And even after the race, it seemed like Max and Charles were having a bit of a discussion, and Max was like, you can look at this face on the right-hand side, be like, okay, what were they thinking, right? Because I'm sure Leclerc was telling Max about this situation, and Max was like, what were they thinking? Because they could have easily, theoretically, double-stacked the cars. Now, Matteo Binotto said the following: we couldn't double-stack as the cars were too close. Now, I'm not really sure this is the case. Karim was doing the analysis and saying there was about a 4.6 second gap, and even if the gap was 2 seconds, they could have, brought one guy into the pits, done the pit stop. Of course, Sainz waits a couple of seconds sitting there. Maybe he loses a few seconds in the pit stop. Maybe he loses the position to Hamilton. I don't know, but it at least still gives the team theoretically a better chance to win the race. And realistically, there was no risk of anyone behind. Hamilton wasn't just going to stay out there on the hard and take track position. Hamilton was going to pit anyway for the softs. That was the only realistic way to try and make something happen. Look, Mercedes wouldn't have just said, okay, Hamilton, stay out there for 10 laps on these hards, and effectively done what Ferrari did. It was a pretty obvious call. Now, it was always difficult when you're the first car in Charles Leclerc. What do you do with the first car? Because if you do pit, then maybe a guy behind you stays out on the tyres, and you get a bit of an interesting situation. But it's pretty obvious, in this particular instance, that pitting was probably the correct decision. I think Binotto even admitted after the fact that it probably was the correct decision to do this, because they expected the softs to degrade. They were thinking that after after just a few laps, the softs kind of fall off the curve and therefore like showered out an advantage towards the end of the race. Turns out that didn't happen at all, actually. And I think with the benefit of hindsight, they kind of think, okay, we probably should have double sacked even if we lost a bit of time. But the idea being here, theoretically, we picked Carlos to stop as Charles was leading, hoping Carlos would defend him, right? The idea that, you know, told Sainz to keep the 10 car length gap or whatever to allow Charles to get a bit of a, well, distance up the road, maybe warm the hard tyres up again. And I mean, Sainz was having none of it, saying, look, I want to fight for the victory here. You guys made the strategy call at the end of the day. I'm just going to do what you put me in the position to do. And he does admit, right, that they thought at the time that the gap between Charles and Carlos wasn't quite enough to make it happen. The others were so close behind it in this situation, you can't even lose 1 second in the pit stop, which might be true. Like if they'd lost a second double stacking, they might have lost the position to Hamilton. But like, I mean, still, they probably would have had a better chance to fight for a double podium, let's just say, than they would have done with exactly what happened in the race. So interesting strategic call again from Ferrari. Like, and they've also got to think about the fact that if you are Ferrari and you're thinking about this, it's not okay, like you have a clear 1-2, but you kind of do have a clear 1-2 driver, right? Clearly Leclerc is your number one driver. He's the guy that has the best chance to take down Max Verstappen in this year's championship. You've probably got to favour him in your strategic calls. Leaving him as a sitting duck at the end of the race is not putting Ferrari or Charles Leclerc in the best position to actually do anything against Red Bull, right? And the fact that they were gifted this opportunity this weekend to, well, give Charles Leclerc the 25 points plus potentially, and well, it went the other way. Good for Ferrari in terms of constructors' points, but like it's not really what they would, I'm sure, be looking for when it comes to what they would say was the ideal weekend. And even there were some further thoughts on this, right? As Leclerc said, from my view, it seemed like we lost too much time. Obviously, I don't have the full picture from the car. I need to review it with the team. Maybe when I see the whole picture, I will understand. So like, again, good, like level-headed statements here from Leclerc, but still, I'm sure the frustration is creeping in. And this was the other rather interesting statement here from Mattia Binotto in terms of how Mercedes have made progress. Effectively saying, look, they are back competitive. They're back in business. He feels like they are, well, once again, in contention for winning races, as it seemed like they were. We looked at it in the last video, and as he says, I'm happy Mercedes are back competitive. Quinn was kind of saying, are you actually happy? Like, do you not just want the one-way fight or two-way fight with Red Bull? Because that theoretically should give them better chances to win races. But, well, actually, as he says, it's an interesting point, actually. They can also take points of our main competitors, right? So given the idea that if Mercedes are back in business and Ferrari are as quick as they were this weekend, there's a plausible possibility that, let's just say, like for the rest of the season, Leclerc finishes P1 every single race, Verstappen finishes P2 every single race. It would take a lot of races to overturn the deficit that Leclerc currently has. But if the Mercedes are there and Hamilton's getting P2s or Russell's getting P2s and Verstappen's, you know, falling out of the podium places or whatever, then they can close the gap quicker. So it's an interesting thought really here from Ferrari that actually Mercedes being back in the fight could be beneficial to them because they could take points off, well, of course, the Red Bull, but of course they also could take points off the Ferraris, as effectively Hamilton arguably did in this race to Charles Leclerc. He could have done with a podium placement here, especially because he's now missed out on every single podium since Miami, which is, well, certainly quite something. And that does mean the championship looks like this. So after being gifted an opportunity this weekend, Ferrari, to make a run, Carlos Sainz is now within 9 points of his teammate up here, and Max Verstappen still leading by an awful lot, 181, Sergio Perez 147, Hamilton closes in a lot, of course, on George Russell, Norris, Bottas, Ocon and Alonso kind of rounding out the top 10, and in terms of constructors, it's still going to be Red Bull number one. Ferrari not so far behind as they were, but still not lost that many points. I'm pretty sure Ferrari gained like 10 points on Red Bull in constructors. Like that's not necessarily going to cut it. So again, Ferrari strategic issues kind of plaguing the team and the situation, and Leclerc's not happy about it at all, but maybe they're going to debrief and figure out what they could do differently next time. But definitely an interesting decision because I thought it was pretty obvious really when the safety car was going to come out. Like they had plenty of time. They had a good like 10 seconds to make the call. Like I'm pretty sure it was Leclerc coming around Stowe into the effectively the final corner before the chicane, at least the final corner before the pits, and like they had plenty of seconds to tell him, look, come into the pits. Like they could have done the calculations, but again put Ferrari under pressure to make a good decision, and that they'll usually choose the wrong one despite walking away with the race victory regardless. But it could have been more. And this, of course, just to mention on Carlos Sainz, most race starts before their first victory. Perez broke that not long ago in the Red Bull seat. Sainz is now the second place driver in this list with 150 races before his victory. Mark Webber, Rubens Barrichello and Jarno Trulli closing out the rest of this list. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new as always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.